Good evening, everyone. My name is Kevin Adipo. Welcome to Get It Right with Atara Solutions, a webinar series that seeks to demystify issues in employment and entrepreneurship. We do this every Tuesday from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. live on Zoom and YouTube. Facebook as well, we are just trying to log in. So this is season 3. Season 1, we did 26 episodes. Season 2, we did close to 33 episodes. If you've missed any of our webinars, please log onto our YouTube channel and Get It Right with Atara Solutions, where a lot of content are there to help you with your career and with your business. Kindly, at this juncture, allow me to recognize our partners, those who have been of great support by enabling us to bring these seasons to you, and we are grateful to them as well. Allow me just to share my screen at this point. We have Balcon Housing. Balcon Housing is a real estate and a property management company. We are also partnering with Stallion Company. Stallion Company is a construction company that deals with construction services, renovating of houses, offices, partitioning of your office if you have such use in your offices, changing of tiles or fixing a room, building a home. Please contact Stallion Construction. They are there for you. We have Ames College of Business. This is a college based in Nairobi. They offer all business courses from CHRP for HR professionals who are with us here today and are looking to do their CHRP exams. Please reach out to Ames College of Business. And they do online classes, and they are very, very flexible for any person who is looking to better themselves. If you're in need to get in touch with them, please feel free to get in touch with us. That is through email or through our Get It Right with Atara Solutions chat, so that we can help you or we can hook you up with them. We have the Career Management Center. The Career Management Center is a HR consultancy and training firm. Jen is great enough to be the lead HR in this company. And they're looking, or rather they help you in the journey of job seeking, and she has a great program for those ladies, moms who are looking to get back into employment after taking a mommy break. That is to raise their children. Please get in touch with her, get in touch with Jen, and she's going to definitely help you get back in track. We have Pathway Solutions. Pathway Solutions, we have, in fact, today, just before we end our program, we are going to share with you what Pathway Solutions, they have great LMS programs, and Mr. Frank will be able to give support. And the good thing is that in the LMS programs, they help you, and they help you because it's very flexible, so it's easier for you to do the programs according to your routine, according to your timing. So when you're done with them, trust you me, you get a certificate for the course that you took. So definitely Pathway Solutions is here to serve us, is here to help us. We are going to share with you some of the programs that they have for us in this session as a way to support our viewers. We have Wandi Restaurant. Wandi Restaurant is based at Kambiti. That is along Nanyuki Nairobi Highway on your way to Sagana. Their juices, last week, Grace talked about their spinach. To this week, definitely I'm going to touch on their juices. They have out of the earth fresh juice. So if you're along that route, if you're headed towards that route, please feel free to pass by Wandi Restaurant to enjoy their juices. You'll definitely enjoy and ask for more. We have another partner of ours called WeClean. WeClean is a cleaning company that, trust me, you give them your carpet and they clean it in less than 6 minutes. They have a machine that cleans your carpet and in less than 6 minutes, it's dry. You just take it out and the only thing you're going to require from them is asking them when they're going to deliver it to you next or where you want it to be delivered. So in today's session, you've definitely had us talk about tax. We have a tax professional. Sorry, just a minute. Great. Today, we have a tax professional by the name Oscar Musyoka. Oscar Musyoka, let me just give you a brief history about Oscar. Oscar is a tax professional with a tax experience of over 12 years. And Oscar is a tax manager at Margie Sanik and Company. Prior to joining the company, Oscar worked with PKF, and he was extensive experience in the provision of general and specialized tax compliance and tax advisory services. And across the East Africa region, he has been involved in offering strategic tax planning and tax advisory services in mergers, acquisitions, and reorganizations, transfer pricing, tax health checks, and due diligence reviews, and routine tax compliance services in various sectors of the economy. He has also been involved in securing various tax exemptions within the East Africa region. He holds a bachelor degree of business in finance and banking from Moi University, and he is currently pursuing a master's in tax and customs at the Kenya School of Revenue Administration. Oscar is a member of the following professional bodies, that is Institute of Certified Public Accounts of Kenya, Institute of Certified Secretaries of Kenya, and Institute of Human Resource Management. I can't exhaust to talk about Oscar. So I'll just allow Oscar to, if there's anything I'm missing, he can be able to at least expound. Mr. Oscar, welcome.
Thank you, Kevin, for that introduction. Thank you for the introduction. I do not wish to add any item or subtract there of what you just mentioned.
Thank you. Just before I forget, Catherine Sidandi, welcome. Catherine Sidandi is always here every Tuesday with us, and he helps us to be inclusive and help our people who are not able to hear us. And we thank you, Miss Catherine, for always being there for us and always supporting us and always trying to make us be inclusive. Oscar, please, back to you. What do you have for us today?
Thank you. So for today's session, allow me to share my screen in a minute. Good. So today we'll be focusing about the budget for the fiscal year 2022-2023, and in it we'll cover the following subtopics: just a look at what the economy has been doing, as well as the expectations and aspirations of the government in terms of revenue and expenditure. We'll also look at some of the proposals that the government is putting forth with regards to policy, legal, and institutional reforms. We'll also look at the fiscal framework that is meant to achieve the objectives of the government. We'll also dive into some of the key spending priorities that the taxpayers' money will be spending. And talking of spending, we'll also have a glance at the provisions of the Finance Bill 2022, which has currently been tabled into the National Assembly for debate and approval before the Parliament actually goes on the long recess in view of the upcoming elections in August. Then we'll have the Q&A question. Kevin.
Great. I'm very sure almost all of us here today are looking forward for this great session. And as you can see, we never disappoint. We always have it, or we always get it right with you. Mr. Oscar, please take the wheel.
Okay, thank you. So for the sake of time, let's just dive into it. And obviously, we all know the key reason why the budget this year was read a bit early, that is in April as opposed to June, what has been the trend in the past. Even the other partners within the East African community are also yet to read their budgets. Is because of the electioneering period in August. And it's a good thing because it will also allow the finance bill to be debated, and some of the key changes which we'll see and discuss in subsequent slides will be approved, and at least there'll be some ample time for its implementation, with some of the provisions setting in as early as the 1st of July this year, and other provisions will kick in from 1st of January 2023. For a start, we'll have a glance at the economic performance and outlook. And globally, even amidst the aftershocks of the COVID-19 pandemic, in 2020, the economy grew by 5.9%. This is in contrast to a contraction that was there in the previous year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And moving forward, a positive outlook will mean that we'll achieve even better economic trends going forward. Not to mention some of the risks and the headwinds that the economies, not only here in Kenya, are facing, but also globally due to certain factors, because of other issues and geopolitical factors. We cannot overemphasize the current fights that are ongoing between Russia and Ukraine. And obviously that would have some effect on most of our commodities here, because as we all know, they are big on the exportation of oil and gas, and those form part of our key ingredients as far as the manufacturing sector is concerned. All in all, our economy has proved resilient over the recent past, and we expect it to stabilize at the rate of 6% in the fiscal year, owing to recovery of the agriculture sector, which contributes over 40% of our GDP and creates more than 60% of the employment in this country, and also good performance of the services sector. Like we've mentioned, some of the pressures in the East will infect and affect the level of inflation in this country. And by now we are all aware that most of the prices of the basic commodities, what we will consider as the ordinary basket, have been on an upward trend. Obviously, this is affecting the globe, and it's not just an issue of the Kenyan economy. And obviously, our case being that most of the manufacturing that we do locally, most of the raw materials, inputs, and whatnot are majorly imported. So when there is an upward trend in those prices globally, obviously the prices at our supermarkets and other stores will keep on rising. Not to mention the effect of fuel has been on upward scale, and majorly any commodity you want to mention of, there's always a factor of fuel that will always come into play as far as the pricing is concerned. All in all, the inflation will be expected to oscillate between 2.5 to 7.5% as per the targets with the CBK. Having mentioned of inflation, another key component that we need to talk about is the issue of the exchange rate. And over the recent past, the currency has actually depreciated against the US dollar. And as we all know, we are net importers. So what that means is every time the currency depreciates, there is each and every pressure to ensure that the price for the commodity for your next purchase will always be bought at a higher price. However, these are more of short-term effects, and in the long term, stability is expected to have regained. Now we can dive into and dissect the budget as was presented by the CS National Treasury, Ambassador Ukur Yatani. And with this, allow me to present a table in terms of just a breakdown of the total revenues, the grants, and the deficit for the last 2 years. So Treasury is quite optimistic that local revenue collection will grow from 2 trillion to about 2.4 trillion, owing to improvements within the services sector. And also it's optimistic that the economy will be resilient enough and create additional, not only additional employment, but also additional taxable income, which they will be able to tap into. And obviously, as we move along, we'll see some of the initiatives that they are putting in place to ensure that that is met. The grants in use will be sliced by 50% from 62 billion to 33 billion for the current for the fiscal year 2022-2023. And in a good measure, there is actually a reduction in the deficit from 930 to about 863. That's about 10%. These may be attributed to the growth in revenue, knowing that the budget of 3 trillion is one of the highest that as a country we've ever had. So the question is, how will this revenue be raised, both locally or otherwise, to ensure that the government objectives and programs are effected for the fiscal year 2022-2023. Before us is a tabulation of the key income that was derived from the various taxes in the country. One of them is income tax, which accounted for 40.9% of the total revenue collection, and that is expected to stabilize and come to 40.8% in this fiscal year. Number two is the value-added tax, which will also remain fairly constant at the rate of 23% of the national collection to the exchequer and stabilize about 24% for the current fiscal year. Personally, that's a tax rate that I would want to see how it will behave in the coming fiscal year. Reason being, and as we may all be aware, from 1st of August, there will be the implementation of the tax invoice management system, which basically will be an electronic way of, and an advanced measure at that, of the current VAT regime, ETR specifically. Because specifically what that will do is it will ensure that each and every time a transaction is done at whichever part of this nation, then the revenue authority, which the CS actually suggested should be rebranded to revenue services, will have a visibility of that transaction. And what that means is at the end of the month, they'll be in a position to know how much sales have been made by a certain entity and how much purchases have been made by a certain entity. And for those who interact with the aspect of VAT on the input and output, then the authority will just, for their planning purposes, they'll have all the data they can to estimate how much tax it is that they expect from you. Next to that is excise tax, which has been nicknamed the sin tax, as we all know it. And this has been majorly, or previously as it were, been imposed on the harmful products within our economy, the likes of beers and cigarettes. However, over the recent past, and if we look at some of the products that attract excise locally, the likes of water and juices, some of these are basic commodities which the only way you could justify why they're being subjected to excise is purely for revenue collection, not that they are harmful products in any way that the government needs to grow or regulate. So there will be a slight increase in the excise tax because more and more products are still being brought into this category, as we will see. And the rest will be the parastatal collections, what is normally referred to as the appropriations in aid, and then among other taxes, which will account to about 5%. From the budget presentation, the CS mentioned that the Treasury is well aware of some of the concerns that the nation has. And this is in relation to factors like the high cost of living, which we said it's partly a creation of the projections and trends within the global market. The other one is the high level of unemployment among the youths in the country, and also the issue of income inequality. That is to say, the ever widening gap between the rich and the poor, and also an acknowledgement of some of the challenges that the government is facing, but bold enough to address, and more so the issue of the public debt, which has been quite on the rise, leading to an increase of the ceiling by the National Assembly, and a suggestion by the CS National Treasury in the budget to ensure that the capping on the level of national debt is actually benchmarked with the recommendations given internationally, and ensure that that is pegged to the gross domestic product of this country, which is just the total collections and productivity that the government is in a position to collect from a revenue perspective. Having mentioned about the revenue collection, then we can have a look at how the government plans to expend that revenue. And undeniably, the biggest revenue expenditure item consistent to the previous years is the issue of the recurrent expenditure. And as we all know, the main reason why this has always been one of the highest budget expenditures is due to some inefficiencies and bloated regimes and staff within the public sector, which some of the institutions may require consolidation and harmonization of the services to avoid overlaps and duplications. And that sometimes become a bit complicated with the issues of the devolution, where there may be an overlap of functions and leading to double expenditure or on some matters. And what that does is because the revenue collection is constrained, and like we said, we have a budget deficit, and owing to the huge borrowing that we've had in the recent past, then number two will come as interest payments just to service the debt that has been taken either on infrastructure projects or otherwise. And there is little money left for development. And the numbers, as they suggest, it's like we just borrow for the development. A critical look at the budget will mean that whatever is budgeted is just the interest payments and the recurrent expenditure, and the money is done. So whatever sums needs to be collected or appropriated and utilized for the development function, this is what normally would go to would be borrowed, either domestic or externally. So having acknowledged some of the challenges that the government is facing and that a country has, it will be critical to consider some of the key considerations that the government is keen on implementing within the fiscal year. And one of them is ensure that there's enhanced partnership and more so fully exploit the role that the private sector plays in this economy. And this basically would include involvement of the private sector in funding key infrastructure projects through what is referred to as the public-private partnerships. And we have the Public-Private Partnership Act of 2021 in place. And the beauty of it is that it ensures that if the government has a viable project that they want to invest in and the resources may not be there, then they can actually engage the private sector to not only design, but also to finance and operate that project. And eventually, once they're done with operation and they've recouped their investment, then they can actually hand over that project to the government. A perfect example on this will be the expressway, which is to be launched in a few days' time. Then government is also committed to ensure that there's support to the micro, small, and medium enterprises by facilitating access to finance and also on key structural reforms, because they control a big chunk of the employment in this country. Then a look into the future, there'll be need to invest in ICT and the digital infrastructure so that can enable e-commerce and also ensure that there's efficient delivery of public services in the long term. Then there's also the need to promote and strengthen the local and foreign resource mobilization efforts, so that because we've said once the government spends on the current expenditure and on the interest payments, there's little money for development, then some room can be created for that, and the future generations do not suffer because of the misdoings of the current and past generations. There's also the need to improve the social protection welfare through targeted interventions to ensure that the marginalized, the elderly are actually can get a cushion for their daily expenditures by way of a stipend from the government. That has been going on, but we will all agree that it has not been to the extent that it needs to be. It's not fully exploited. Then there's also the need to promote the local production and processing. This is in line with the Big Four agenda on items like manufacturing. And whereas these may be there just on paper, it's sometimes there is normally a conflict, because what the government indicates they want to pursue, some of the measures that they introduce more so on tax matters and other policy issues and legislations do not really enable the local manufacturing sector to thrive, and more so to ensure that it effectively competes with other regions and seasoned players within the globe. So just a graphic presentation of some of the expenditures that we've been mentioning. Interest payments, we've talked about that. Education, just the need to ensure that a well-educated nation, and also the protection and insurance education, so to speak, for the future generations. The need to invest in the ICT, like we've mentioned. The share to the counties has been kept at 370 billion, similar to the allocation for the budget as per the fiscal year 2021-2022. 342 billion allocated for the public administration, 234 to governance, justice, law and order. Then quite some low amount there with regard to health. And of course, this is in the backdrop of the reality check that our health system was faced with the current COVID-19 pandemic, where each and every facility in each and every county in this country was actually overstretched. So there will be need to look and fund the healthcare system with a long-term view, not just providing short-term measures and underfunding, which may not be fully absorbed and may not meet the desired function. National security, 117 billion. Then there's the issue of environment protection, water and natural resources. Just to mention on this is, my view is we have way too many water bodies in this country, which needs to be consolidated and ensure efficiency, so that there may be no overlaps and duplication of efforts in some of them. Then surprisingly, and as always, the spending in agriculture and food security, which is another big four agenda item, has been flashed to a low of 66 billion. This is in contrast to the huge contribution that the agricultural sector has in terms of employment creation and contribution to the GDP of this country, like we've mentioned. So maybe it's something which as a nation we would like to look at keenly and ensure that perhaps the government can just have a long-term view on this and ensure that projects that are funded are well thought out and not white elephants as you would have it for projects like the Galana Kulalu irrigation scheme. We mentioned about the social protection. There's an allocation of 62 billion there, and then 23 billion on other economic and commercial affairs. This is just a summary of some of the key expenditure highlights, and it's not comprehensive in any way. So having mentioned about that, we can look at some of the proposed tax changes that the Finance Bill 2022, as we said, is currently in Parliament for debate. So some of these changes in the bill, most of them would expect them to be there in the Finance Act, maybe a slight change here and there. So previously, there's been a restriction in terms of the allowable cash donations that corporates make to charitable organizations. So maybe the government has realized that some part of the roles that these organizations play are actually functions that ordinarily the government would have carried out. So what this amendment means is that any cash donations made to charitable organizations shall be a tax deductible expense, and the organization making that donation will not suffer that tax like it's been in the past. Then, in a move to expand the tax base, the gains accruing to non-residents on transactions involving derivatives will be taxed. Previously, these were not being taxed. Then the exemption of microfinance institutions from the limitation rule on interest expenditure, where interest component is not within the region of 30% of the earnings before interest, tax, and other items as introduced through the Finance Act of 2021. Then there's another big cut whereby the government wants to tap in and expand the tax base, and more so on the multinationals, by ensuring that any multinational which is operating in Kenya and they have operations in other jurisdictions, which the law calls preferential tax regimes, then if the profits being reported in that other preferential tax regime will not be the region of what KRA would have considered to be an arm's length transaction, then there will be an adjustment of the taxable profits here in Kenya based on the transactions that the multinational operating in Kenya has carried out through that other tax jurisdiction, which has a lower tax base. Basically, what this is meant to ensure is that there is no tax leakage and profits are not shifted to jurisdictions which have a lower tax liability. Then there is an expansion of scope in terms of the information that should be furnished to the KRA with relation to multinationals. That is not a new measure, it's just an expansion of the information that should be furnished. With that, we can look at some of the value-added tax measures. As we all know, VAT is normally levied on value add, more so especially on importation or even manufacture of certain goods and also rendering of services. So there is exemption of medical supplies from VAT if the bill is approved as is. Then there's a big gain for the local manufacturing sector in line with the Big Four agenda. That is the exemption of plant and machinery used in the manufacture of pharmaceutical products. maybe this may be a reactionary measure in relation to what happened to the COVID-19 pandemic and the realization that we don't have capacity for some of the basic requirements, even things like oxygen, which are required within our facilities. And to mention is that there was also, for the second time, the CS National Treasury mentioned that the national tax policy framework will actually be tabled in Parliament, and the public will be invited to give views. This was mentioned in the last budget, but it was never tabled. It will be interesting to see whether and how this will be drafted so that we don't see a regime whereby a tax measure is implemented this year, and 1 or 2 years down the line, then it's withdrawn, and that tends to create uncertainty for the investors, and obviously it's not good for economy. Then another gain for the local motor vehicle assembly sector is any inputs and raw materials that is used by the local assemblers for the passenger motor vehicles shall be exempted from VAT. And equally, when that motor vehicle is being sold in the local market, it will also be exempt from VAT. This is a good move, as it will ensure that the local manufacturers can actually assemble these vehicles at quite discounted rates. And by not charging VAT upon sale, it will ensure that the pricing for the vehicle will be competitive, considering that any importation of the same would actually attract VAT at the rate of 16%. Then another introduction is the VAT status of maize flour, cassava flour, wheat or maize-lin, and this will not be applicable immediately as per the finance bill. This will only come into force 6 months after the assent of the bill. This should be sometimes in November, December, or early next year. It will be keen to watch the debates in Parliament more so on that item, because it touches on each and every minority in this country. And personally, I feel that is not a move that should be approved and find its way in the Finance Act, as it will keep the inflationary pressure on the rise, and that will not be good for the economy. We can now look at the excise duty changes. And as we said in the introductory stage, excise previously used to be a sin tax, but over the recent past, then this has actually been used as just a revenue collection measure like any other. And one of the provisions in the Excise Duty Act is to ensure that there's the national inflation adjustment every year. Now the Commissioner KRA is empowered to exclude certain items from that provision owing to the prevailing economic conditions. Owing to the current rise in the poultry sector and eggs, any eggs imported for the purpose of hatching will actually be exempt from excise. Then also another big on pharmaceutical sector is exemption of the neutral spirit that is imported by pharmaceutical manufacturers. Previously, there's been excise payable on these, which these manufacturers were actually claiming as a refund from KRA, and that was taking quite some time. Locally manufactured passenger vehicles will also be exempt from excise duty. We all know imported cars will attract that, so that would be a good gain for the local motor vehicle assembly lines. Then in another move to expand the tax base and also keep check on the advertisement for the same products, as it were, there'll be excise duty on advertisement of local betting and gaming. Then there is also another inclusion on the expansion of the scope of excise duty, whereby it will be charged on liquid nicotine. I think with that, and for the sake of time, I can allow Kevin to pick up any questions that we may have, so that we may respond to the same as well.
Wow. A lot of questions streaming in from my end, and I wonder which one to pick first, which are not. Just before I forget, let me once again acknowledge those partners of ours who've been able to allow us to bring this information to all of us in time, and without waste of time, let me just acknowledge Balcon Housing, which is a real estate firm and a real estate company, Stallion Construction, and Ames College of Business and Technology, the Career Management Center, Pathway Solutions. As I mentioned to you before, Pathway Solutions has today given us great opportunities. We are today going to give 4 people sponsorship. That is 2 job seekers. So if you are any job seeker seeking to get a sponsorship today, please comment, and we'll be able to pick randomly. My team, Tara's team, please go on the chat and go on the inbox, try and select a few people, job seekers, from which we are going to select 2 who are going to get sponsorship, and 2 also people in the working category, either CEO or HRM, because we are looking to expand, and as we always do, make sure that your business prospers. To get your certification for the 4 people, you have to do a continuous assessment test and a final assessment test. We have Wandi restaurants. They are located along Kambiti, and we have We Clean. We Clean is a cleaning company that is located in Nairobi. So if you're looking to clean any product of yours, be it an office cleaning or house cleaning, reach out to us. We are going to help you connect with We Clean. So back to us, Mr. Oscar. I wonder if you're still around.
Yes, I am.
All right, we have a number of questions here. We have a number of questions from everyone is trying to throw in a question. Person is asking, our budget 2022-2023 has increased. That is 130% trillion of the first spending plan in 2013. What does this mean to us as the working community and as business people?
Please come again on that question. The
Hello.
audio was not clear on the last bit.
Hello.
Kevin, kindly repeat the question. I think you've logged in twice. It has some echo.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I think one of the devices has just logged out. I wonder if you had my question.
Kindly come up again. Now you're clear.
Oh, thank you. As I was saying, our budget for 2022-2023 has increased 136% higher than the 1.4 trillion first spending for the plan in 2013. What does this mean to the common business person?
Yeah, when the government expenditure increases, it just shows a demonstration that and the confidence that the government has in the economy. because what is normally referred to as the productivity of the country, which is the gross domestic product, or rather the GDP, the biggest contributor there is the government expenditure. So every time the government increases spending, then the economy naturally grows. Obviously, the other question related to that has always been whether that would reflect to the pockets of each and every citizen, but that's a question for another day altogether.
All right. We have Mr. Stephen who is asking, what is the real growth rate as to us as a country?
The real growth rate is in the region of 5.9% in GDP terms. That is the estimate for the 2021 year of income.
All right. Mr. Richard is asking the same question, but now the inflation rate. But just before we go to that, Stephen again has asked, you have spoken about the national tax policy. How significant will that be in the tax landscape of this country?
Okay, we can start with the first question, the issue of the inflation rate in the country. And if you can trace back from 2017, it just post and pre the elections, it was about 7.9%. In 2018, 4.69%, 2019, 5.2%, and 2020, 5.17%. And it's expected to oscillate between 3 and 7.5% in the coming fiscal year. That is the level of inflation. To the second question on the issue of the national tax policy framework, like I indicated during the presentation, this is something which the CS National Treasury had mentioned in the previous year, though it never came into fruition. So to answer your question, what our expectation is once this is tabled for public participation is it should just ensure that number one, that the tax system in this country is simplified enough. Reason being, over the recent years, and this year we must appreciate, unlike the previous years, there has been no much of tax changes. Over the years, we've experienced so many tax changes to an extent, even tax advisors, we need to engage analysts to ensure that we keep tabs with some of these changes. So the policy should be able to address some of those issues. The second issue that I would mention that it should address would be the issue of the adequacy of the taxes that we raise in this country. Reason being, taxes are raised for a reason, and that is to ensure that certain projects and government expenditures are financed. So the framework should be able to address that issue of expenditure to an extent, let the government live within its means, and ensure that issues to do with borrowing are not overstretched as they are at the moment. The third item that I would talk into would be the issue of, I talked about simplicity, and the adequacy would be an issue of transparency. Transparency in the sense that when some organizations pay tax in this country, it will be critical to consider where that tax is being applied. And if there are people who have certain tax incentives, then that also needs to be out there, and also the allocation, how that is being done, as well as refunds that the government needs to do. Then that transparency aspect needs to be there, as well as the timelines around that. The final aspect that I would mention that would love to see in the tax policy would be issues to do with the administrative aspect, because like we said, the tax system should not be complicated, because if it's complicated, then the level of compliance goes down. And when the level of compliance is not that high, the administrative cost to collect taxes is quite huge, because what that means is not unless KRA or KRS as it will be, comes knocking at your door, that's the only time you'll pay tax. So we expect to see an ease in terms of the administrative cost. That is the cost that is normally expended to collect tax, and the recommended rate internationally normally is 2%, and we expect the national tax policy framework to ensure that the administrative cost is actually maintained at below 2%. Over to you, Kevin.
Talking of incentives, Nick Kisadi is just wondering the reason behind adding exercise on advertising of alcohol while the liquid itself is already covered. What other tax incentives are there for manufacturers given the high cost of production?
That's a good question. Obviously, and this one I'm not defending the government in any way, but I would say the reason why they want to excise advertising for alcohol, betting and all that is just to cash in that economy. Reason being, it's a growing economy and it may not affect much the commodity on the other side. So they just want to cash in on that. There was another question in terms of is it the allowance or the investment that manufacturers are getting? So we can start with like the pharmaceutical sector, which has been given quite a number of exemptions from excise to VAT exemption on the raw materials, as well as exemption on VAT on the purchases of their machinery. So in most cases, what the government does is it just creates a proper enabling environment for businesses to thrive. And what that means is when an investor here locally invests an amount of money, let's say 100 million, there are various tax allowances that are normally granted based on the nature of establishment that you have, so that at the end of the day, either in 2 years' time or within 4 years' time, the government will have given you a 100% allowance of the investment that you had done. And basically what that means is that it ensures that there is a reduction in the tax that you are supposed to pay, which is commensurate to the investment that you had made. Over to you, Kevin.
All right. And seeing here Mr. Sol Munoko. Sol Munoko, you've raised your hand. It seems like you have a question for us. Sol Munoko. All right, as we're waiting for Sol, Cecil Ongwai. Hello, Cecil. Okay. It seems like we've exhausted the questions that we had for you, Mr. Oscar, today.
Kevin, and the Q&A.
Yes?
There are a lot of questions in Q&A.
Okay. All right. Sorry for this, Mr. Solomon. I was almost missing your question. It looks like the rain expected is going to be low, and ultimately prolonged drought this year. This is again an electioneering year. Oil crisis affecting output. Where is the expected 6.6 GDP growth projection coming from? Mr. Oscar.
Yeah. Solomon Gasho, that's a good question. And undeniably, the government is ambitious on that. Perhaps the optimism that they have is because some of the oil shocks that are experienced within the international supply chain because of the Russia, Ukraine, and other supply chain logistics are considered to be more of a short term in nature. And in the long run, the prices are expected to stabilize. The other issue is when the government talks of a growth rate, in a simple sense, they're just looking at the total expenditure that the government will be able to make, as well as the contribution in the private sector, and also the net exchange rate in terms of the imports and exports that the country does. And the biggest contributor in that growth rate will be government expenditure. And considering that the government has already will be as an optimistic budget to spend more, then the only way we'll achieve that growth is through borrowing.
Okay. Susie seems to be wondering what the good question was. Susie, we are just trying to understand where the 6.6 GDP growth projection is going to come from, considering that there's going to be a prolonged drought this year, and we have currently been experiencing oil crisis, which has not yet ended. So that is the question Mr. Oscar was trying just to answer and give us an understanding too. It seems like from both the Q&A and the chats, we've exhausted the questions, unless there's something I'm missing. Grace? Is there any question that I'm missing?
I didn't hear the answer on inflation rate.
Oscar?
Yeah, sure.
Kindly just expound on it further.
Sure. The inflation rate has been oscillating between 5 to 7% in the last 4 or 5 years. So in 2017, it was about 7.9%. In 2018, 4.69%, 2019, 5.2%, and 2020, 5.1%. So in most cases, you'll find that the inflation rate will normally be 2 or 3 percentages at variance with the growth rate, which is a good thing in the country, because what that means is there's a net growth. Because if you have a rate of inflation which is higher than the expected economic growth rate, then in real terms there is no growth in the economy. It's just an adjustment in the computation in line with the inflationary trends.
Great. Bob Asio, yes, we post our recordings by every Friday of every week. So kindly just log into our YouTube account, where you're going to get the recording posted by Friday. And we have a lot of questions on whether you can share with the group the notes, Mr. Oscar. Is that really possible?
Yes, we'll be able to share a detailed version of the budget.
Great. For those of us who are willing and are willing to be part of the sponsorship program, kindly send an email to grace@atarasolutions.co.ke so that we might be able to select and get back to you. And Yeah, unless we really appreciate you, Mr. Oscar, for the detailed information you've shared with us. And Grace, is there anything that you'd wish to share with us today? Everyone is asking, where's Grace? Where's Grace? And they're hearing your voice.
Kevin, I am here. For those who are asking, I am here behind the scene, and I am seeing the mentee do the work, a bit of it, as we handle a few other things happening for us. But we really, really appreciate. Thank you so much, Oscar, for choosing to be with us here. For the person who is asking about the recording, we were actually live on YouTube today. So you can actually go to our YouTube channel. Jacinta has already shared the link on the chat. If you have missed part of this, you can actually go back and be able to listen in. We will be able to share the presentation, and also, like Oscar has promised, we'll do the budget, the detailed version of it, so that you can also get to chambua for yourself. Other than that, Kevin, I think I'm good. For those of you who have chosen, I've seen about 4 people, 2 job seekers and 2 professionals. Please email us on grace@atarasolutions.co.ke to get a chance to claim your prize from Pathway Solution Services to get training on their LMS. This is self-paced. No one is teaching you. You have to learn by yourself. And there's an assessment at the end, and then there will be a certificate offered to you. So I think that is it from me, Kevin. So Oscar, I really appreciate your in-depth unpacking of this. And I know you owe us a session on bookkeeping. Let's plan on that so that you can also get more. So for those of you who are seeking tax services, it's that time of the year where we are all required to file our taxes. Please, we will share Oscar's contact details so that you can get in touch with him and be compliant. Compliant is normally not a choice. KRA will always catch up with you. So make use of Oscar, who is here, and he'll be able to sort all your tax needs. So yeah, that will be all from me, Kevin. Over back to you.
Great. So lest I forget, as I mentioned to you, Pathway had great packages for us. So being led by our own Catherine Sidandi, we are going to give the deaf community a sponsorship for 5 people, each 5 training courses, which are 100% sponsored by Pathway Solution Services. In addition, Sidandi is also going to be part of this program. So kindly for those of us, because we are striving to be inclusive, kindly reach out to us again through grace@atarasolutions.co.ke, and we will definitely be looking forward to get in touch with you. Having come to the close of the session, we thank you everyone for choosing to be with us today and for choosing Get It Right. Please log on to our Facebook pages, Get It Right, log on to our YouTube, Get It Right, and feel free to always reach out just in case there is something that you feel we are missing out and you need us to incorporate it in our training. Thank you, and once again, Mr. Oscar, we really appreciate you for your time, and kudos, cheers.
Most welcome and goodbye.
Thank you so much.